Her own mother disowned the obese girl. The mountain man's family welcomed her with open arms. The winter of 1823 came early to the small settlement beneath the Montana peaks. Sarah Mitchell stood outside the cabin that had been her home for 22 years, clutching a worn canvas bag that held everything she now owned: 2 faded dresses, a thin shawl, her father's old pocket watch, and 7 copper coins. "Don't just stand there like a lump," her mother's voice cut through the cold air. "The stage leaves at noon, and I won't have you lingering about making Thomas uncomfortable." Thomas, her mother's new husband, a thin-lipped merchant from St. Louis who had made his feelings about Sarah clear from the moment he arrived. "Too many mouths to feed," he'd said. Sarah's fingers tightened around the bag's handle. "Mama, please, I can work harder. I'll sleep in the barn if—" "Enough!" Her mother, Elizabeth, stood in the doorway. "I've given you more than enough time to find a husband. Lord knows I tried, but no man wants a wife who eats more than she earns." The words landed like stones. Sarah had heard variations of them her entire life, but never so coldly, never with such finality. "Your father spoiled you," Elizabeth continued, "always telling you that you were beautiful, that someone would see your inner light. Well, he's gone, and I'm done living in fantasy. Thomas has been generous enough to give you traveling money. There's a boarding house in Virginia City that takes in seamstresses. Goodbye, Sarah." Her mother stepped back and closed the door. Sarah stood there for a long moment, waiting for the door to open again. But the only sound was the wind whistling through the pine trees. She turned and began walking. By the 3rd day on the road to Virginia City, her feet were bloody inside her worn boots. The bread she'd packed had turned stale, and her water skin was nearly empty. The mountain forest stretched endlessly in all directions, dark and indifferent. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as she struggled up a particularly steep section, her legs finally gave out. She collapsed against a boulder, her body shaking with exhaustion and cold. The first snowflakes began to fall. "This is where I'll die," she thought. "Alone on a mountain road, just like Mama always said I deserved." The sound of wagon wheels jolted her awake. She didn't know how long she'd been sitting there, but the snow was falling steadily now. "Whoa there, Maggie, easy now." A man's voice, deep and calm. Sarah looked up to see a massive draft horse pulling a sturdy wagon. And beside the horse, staring down at her with concerned brown eyes, was a man unlike any she'd seen before. He was young, perhaps 30, with dark hair that brushed his shoulders and a full beard. He wore buckskin clothes and a heavy wool coat. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be out here alone," he said, jumping down from the wagon. "Are you hurt?" Sarah tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. The man moved closer. "My name's Jacob Boone. I'm heading back to my family's ranch just 5 miles west of here. Will you let me help you?" Sarah nodded, too weak to refuse. Jacob lifted her easily and settled her onto the wagon seat, wrapped a thick buffalo hide around her shoulders, and pressed a canteen of water into her trembling hands. "Drink slowly," he instructed. "We'll get you somewhere warm." As the wagon began to move, Sarah finally found her voice. "Why are you helping me?" Jacob glanced at her, and something like sadness flickered across his face. "I once lost someone because no one stopped to help when they should have. I made a promise after that. Anyone I find in need, I help." Sarah slumped against Jacob's shoulder and let the darkness take her. Sarah woke to warmth and the smell of wood smoke and baking bread. She lay in an actual bed, covered in thick quilts. Sunlight streamed through a window. The door opened, and a woman in her 50s entered carrying a tray. She had graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and laugh lines around her eyes. "Well, now you're awake!" the woman exclaimed. "I'm Mary Boone, Jacob's mother. You gave us quite a scare, young lady. 3 days of fever." "3 days?" Sarah struggled to sit up, panic rising. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be a burden. I should—" "Hush now." Mary set the tray down and gently pressed Sarah back. "You're no burden. You were sick, and now you're getting better." Sarah stared at this stranger, unable to comprehend such casual kindness. "But you don't even know me." "We know enough," Mary said, arranging the tray across Sarah's lap. There was a bowl of rich beef stew, fresh bread with butter, and hot tea with honey. Jacob found you half frozen on the mountain road, and we found a letter in your bag that fell out. We weren't trying to snoop, but we needed to know if you had family to contact." Sarah's cheeks burned with shame. She knew what letter Mary meant, the one her mother had written, explaining that Sarah was simple but trainable and would work for room and board alone. "I see," Sarah whispered. "No, I don't think you do." Mary sat on the edge of the bed, her weathered hands clasping Sarah's. "I see a young woman who deserves better than she's been given, and I see someone who looks like she could use a proper home for a while." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks before she could stop them. I'm not good at anything useful." "You're just what every person deserves to be," Mary interrupted firmly. "Valued, safe, fed. Those aren't things you earn, child. Those are things you're owed simply by being human." Sarah sobbed into Mary's shoulder while the older woman held her. When the tears finally subsided, Mary pulled back and smiled. "Now eat your stew, and when you're feeling up to it, come join us. We'd like you to stay a while if you're willing. I could use another pair of hands. My daughter Emma just got married and moved to Oregon Territory." Over the next few days, Sarah's strength returned. The Boone Ranch was a sprawling operation with a main house, barn, chicken coops, and several outbuildings. Besides Jacob and Mary, there was Jacob's father, Thomas, a taciturn but kind man in his 60s, and Jacob's younger brother, Daniel, age 19. They welcomed Sarah with an ease that baffled her. There were no sideways glances at her size, no whispered comments. Daniel asked her about her journey and listened with genuine interest. Thomas taught her how to identify animal tracks, and Jacob was simply kind in a quiet, steady way that made her feel safe. Within a week, Sarah had fallen into a routine. She helped Mary with cooking and preserving food. She discovered she had a talent for baking, and her biscuits became a family favorite. She learned to card wool and spin. She fed the chickens and helped with endless mending. "You're a natural," Mary said one afternoon. "You have a gift for making a home feel warm." That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, she realized the constant anxiety that had dogged her entire life had begun to ease. Here, in this rough-hewn cabin in the wilderness, she was beginning to feel like she belonged. The Montana winter came down hard. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and the family settled into deep rhythms of winter survival. Sarah thrived in this environment, experimenting with recipes, making soap and candles, knitting socks for everyone. It was during the long winter evenings by the fire that Sarah learned about the Boone's history. Thomas had come west in 1805. He'd met Mary in St. Louis. She was a teacher's daughter who'd agreed to travel west to marry him, sight unseen. "People thought I was crazy," Mary laughed, "but I knew in my heart it was right." "What about you, Jacob?" Daniel asked. "Why haven't you found a wife yet?" Jacob, who was repairing a saddle, didn't look up. "Haven't found the right woman, I suppose." But Sarah noticed how his jaw had tightened, and she wondered what story lay behind his solitude. As January turned to February, Sarah's relationship with each family member deepened. She and Mary became especially close. "You're like the daughter I always hoped Emma would be," Mary confessed one afternoon. "She never wanted to learn these quiet arts. I did miss having someone to pass these skills to." The words healed something in Sarah that she hadn't realized was broken. But it was her growing friendship with Jacob that surprised her most. He noticed when Sarah struggled with heavy work and built her a pulley system. When she mentioned missing fresh vegetables, he built her a small greenhouse. When her boots gave out, he crafted her a new pair. "You don't have to do all this," Sarah protested. "I know," Jacob said simply, "but I wanted to." Sarah found herself watching him more than she should. She noticed his gentleness with animals, his patience with Daniel, his daily care for his parents. He was exactly the kind of man she'd dreamed of as a girl, before her mother had convinced her such dreams were foolish. One late February afternoon, Sarah slipped on ice returning from the chicken coop. She went down hard, eggs flying everywhere. Jacob appeared from nowhere, dropping his firewood and rushing to her side. "Sarah, are you hurt?" "Just my pride," she managed, though her hip throbbed. "And your breakfast?" Jacob helped her up, keeping one hand on her arm. "You're pale. Did you hit your head?" No, I'm fine. Sarah. The way he said her name made her breath catch. You don't always have to pretend you're fine. It's all right to need help sometimes. Something in his eyes made Sarah's walls crumble. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she gasped. I don't know why I'm crying. It's not about the eggs. Jacob's voice was gentle. You've been through something hard. You're allowed to feel it. My mother said I was too emotional, Sarah whispered, that it was just another sign of my weakness. Jacob's expression darkened. Your mother was wrong. Feeling things deeply isn't weakness. It's proof you're alive. They stood there in the snow, and something shifted between them. An understanding, a connection neither dared name yet. As winter gave way to early spring, that connection deepened. Jacob began seeking out Sarah's company more deliberately. He'd ask her to walk with him. He'd sit beside her at dinner. He'd stay up after the others had gone to bed, talking with her by the fire. Sarah learned that Jacob loved poetry, especially Wordsworth. He had a gift for observation and could describe the natural world with unexpected eloquence. Sometimes when I'm up in the high country, he told her one night, I feel like I can finally breathe. Does that sound foolish? No, Sarah said. I think we all need places where we fit. Jacob looked at her then, really looked at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. And Sarah realized with growing wonder and terror that she was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy for the first time in her adult life. April arrived with wildflowers transforming the harsh winter landscape. The meadows exploded with color, purple lupines, yellow glacier lilies, white avalanche lilies. Come on, Jacob said one morning, I want to show you something. He led her up a trail to a small plateau. From there, the entire valley spread out below them, with the ranch buildings looking like toys in the distance. This is where I come when I need to think, Jacob said. I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to know that you're part of this now, part of the ranch, part of the family. Jacob, she began, then stopped. He turned to face her fully. I know I'm not supposed to say anything. Ma warned me not to rush. But Sarah, I need you to know. Please don't. The words came out sharp. Please don't say something kind just because you feel sorry for me. Jacob's eyebrows drew together. Sorry for you? I know what I am, Sarah interrupted, old wounds bleeding into her voice. I know what I look like. I know that men don't. The kind of woman who deserves to be loved? Jacob's voice had an edge now. Is that what you're trying to say? My mother made it very clear. Your mother was wrong. The vehemence startled her. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see a woman who survived being abandoned. I see someone who works harder than anyone, who never complains, who makes everyone feel valued. I see someone with a gift for making a house feel like a home. Sarah stared at him, unable to speak. I see someone beautiful, Jacob continued, his voice softening. Your kindness is beautiful. Your strength is beautiful. And yes, I think you're physically beautiful too. Your eyes that change color in different light, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, the way you smile like it's a gift. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face. Jacob, I know this might be too soon, but I needed you to know that when I look at you, I don't see someone to pity. I see someone I could love, someone I think I already do love. The world seemed to stop. You love me, she whispered. I love you, Jacob confirmed, but I don't want you to feel obligated. If all you want is friendship, I can accept that. I just needed you to know that you're worth loving, Sarah. Sarah took a shaky breath. I was so scared. When I realized I was falling for you, I was terrified, because I thought it would just be another disappointment. Jacob took a careful step closer. And now? Now I think maybe dreams are allowed after all. The smile that broke across Jacob's face was like sunrise. Does that mean... It means I love you too, Sarah said. I think I've loved you since you wrapped me in that buffalo hide. Jacob reached out slowly, cupping her face in his hands. May I kiss you? Sarah nodded, and Jacob leaned in, pressing his lips to hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. It was her first kiss, and it was perfect. When they pulled apart, both were smiling like fools. Let's go tell Ma, Jacob said, taking her hand. She's been hoping for this since the day I brought you home. The Boone family's reaction was everything Sarah could have hoped for. Mary cried happy tears. Thomas clapped Jacob on the shoulder and told Sarah gruffly that she was good for the boy. Daniel whooped loud enough to startle the chickens. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Jacob made plans for the future. Jacob wanted to build a separate cabin for them. Sarah dreamed of teaching, passing on skills to other women. "There's so many women like I was," Sarah told Jacob one evening. "Women who've been told they're worthless. I want to help them see what I see now." "Then you will," Jacob said simply. "We'll make it happen." But one morning in early May, Mary came in with mail. "There's a letter for you, dear," she said. Sarah recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. She took it to her room and read, "Sarah, Thomas has left me. I'm alone and struggling. I realize I may have been hasty. If you have not found employment, I hope you might return home. I need help, and I'm willing to forget past grievances. Your mother." Sarah read it 3 times. First came twisted satisfaction, then sadness, finally came clarity. She took out paper and pen. Bayerefo. "Mother, I received your letter. I am sorry to hear of your difficulties. However, I will not be returning. I have found a home here, with people who value me for who I am. I have found love, and I have found peace. I forgive you for sending me away, because in doing so, you gave me the greatest gift, the chance to discover my own worth. I hope someday you can find that peace. Sarah Boone." She sealed the letter and felt lighter than she had in years. When Jacob came to find her, she showed him both letters. He read them silently. When he finished, he looked at her with fierce pride. "You signed yourself Sarah Boone." "I did," Sarah said. "Is that all right? I know we're not married yet." "It's perfect." Jacob pulled her close. "You're already family. The wedding will just make it official." They were married in June, in a simple ceremony under the aspens. Sarah wore a pale blue calico dress that Mary had made. Jacob wore his best clothes and looked at Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Jacob kissed her, Sarah felt a joy so complete it seemed impossible that she'd once believed herself unworthy of love. Sarah and Jacob settled into their new cabin with ease. Their life was simple but rich. Jacob worked the ranch while Sarah helped Mary and began teaching skills to other women in the region. Word spread, and women began traveling to learn from her. Sarah blossomed in this role. She was patient and encouraging, and she made sure every woman left feeling capable and valued. "You're a natural teacher," Mary told her proudly. As autumn arrived, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Jacob's joy was boundless. "Our child will know they're loved from the very beginning," Jacob said one night, his hand on Sarah's belly. "They'll never doubt their worth." One October morning, Sarah and Mary traveled to the settlement. As they were loading their wagon to return, Sarah heard a familiar voice. "Sarah? Sarah Mitchell?" She turned to see her mother. Elizabeth looked older, worn down. Her dress was faded, her face lined with worry. "Hello, Mother," Sarah said calmly. Elizabeth approached slowly. "You look different." "I am different," Sarah replied. "I'm happy." Elizabeth's gaze dropped to Sarah's wedding band. "You're married." "I am. This is my mother-in-law, Mary Boone." Mary stepped forward, her expression polite but cool. An awkward silence fell. "I received your letter," Elizabeth finally said. "I was hoping we might talk. Perhaps you might visit. I thought perhaps I was wrong about some things." Sarah studied her mother. She felt pity, but also strange detachment. "I forgive you," Sarah said quietly. "I truly do. But I won't be visiting. Not because I'm angry, but because I've built a new life and I need to protect it." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "I see. I hope you find peace, Mother. Goodbye." As they drove away, Mary was quiet. Finally she said, "That took strength." "It took distance," Sarah replied, "and time, and knowing that I have a real family now." "We did choose you," Mary agreed, "and we always will." That evening, Sarah told Jacob about the encounter. He held her close. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "You're the strongest person I know." I'm strong because you helped me remember my strength, Sarah said. On a December morning, Sarah gave birth to a daughter. They named her Emma Grace. She's perfect, Jacob breathed. She looks just like you. Poor thing, Sarah joked, but there was only joy in her voice. As Sarah recovered, she reflected on her journey. Just 2 years ago, she'd been cast out, convinced she was worthless. Now she held her daughter, married to a man who cherished her, part of a family that had welcomed her without reservation. Mary visited with soup and fresh bread. When Jacob first brought you here, I saw something in you that reminded me of myself, that feeling of not quite belonging anywhere. How did you overcome it? Thomas, Mary said simply. He loved me for who I was. That love gave me the foundation to become who I was meant to be. Just like Jacob's love has done for you. Sarah squeezed Mary's hand. Thank you for being the mother I needed. You're my daughter, Mary said firmly. Blood doesn't make family, love does. As winter deepened, Sarah settled into motherhood, marveling at the fierce protective love that filled her heart. I will never let you doubt your worth, she whispered to Emma. You will grow up knowing you are loved. Jacob came to sit beside them. She'll know, because she'll see it every day. Spring came again with new life and possibilities. Sarah's teaching had grown into a true school. The ranch was prospering. Emma was growing strong and healthy. One May morning, Sarah stood on her porch, watching the sunrise. She thought about the girl she'd been, the one who believed she was a burden. That girl seemed like a stranger now. The sound of a wagon pulled her from her thoughts. A young woman climbed down, clutching a small bag, looking frightened. Mrs. Boone, the woman called hesitantly. They said in town that you help women who... Sarah recognized that look, the shame, the fear, the desperate hope. She'd worn it once. Come inside, Sarah said warmly. You're safe here. What's your name? Clara. My husband died, and his family said I was too much trouble. You don't have to explain, Sarah interrupted gently. Come have breakfast. We'll figure things out together. As she led Clara inside, Sarah caught Jacob's eye. He smiled and nodded. He understood. They'd done this before, and would again, offering sanctuary to those who needed it. The circle was complete, and the story went on. Years passed, and the Boone Ranch transformed into a thriving community. Sarah's school became permanent. She watched her students discover their worth, just as she had once discovered hers. One evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah and Jacob sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge. Do you ever regret staying here? Jacob asked. Sarah laughed. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. Everything I went through led me here, and I wouldn't change a single step. I love you, Sarah Boone. I love you too. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found in each other the home they'd always needed. Sarah Mitchell had once been cast out by her own mother, but Sarah Boone had been welcomed with open arms into a family that taught her the true meaning of love. And in learning that love, she had discovered something even more precious, herself. No man will ever love you like I do, the mountain man said to the obese girl. On their first night, winter came early to Wyoming territory in 1876, sweeping down from the mountains like a vengeful spirit. The first snow fell in October, blanketing the pine forests in silence so profound it seemed the world itself had stopped breathing. By November, the passes were already treacherous, and sensible folk stayed close to their hearths, burning what wood they'd stockpiled and praying their supplies would last until spring. Silas Boone didn't pray anymore. He stood at the single window of his cabin, watching the snow fall in thick, lazy flakes that caught the fading afternoon light. His hand rested on the weathered wood of the window frame, fingers tracing patterns worn smooth by years of the same gesture. Outside, the world was white and gray and silent. Inside, the crackling of the fire was the only sound. The cabin sat in a narrow valley, surrounded by towering pines and accessible only by a trail that disappeared under snow for half the year. Silas had chosen this place deliberately 10 years ago when he'd first come to these mountains. Remote, isolated, a place where a man could be forgotten, where a man could forget. He turned from the window and added another log to the fire. The flames leaped up hungrily, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The cabin was spare but functional. A bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs he had made himself, shelves holding supplies and trapping gear, and the stone fireplace that kept the brutal cold at bay. Animal pelts covered the floor and hung from the walls: beaver, fox, bear, the fruits of his solitary labor. Silas was 42 years old, though he looked older. His face was weathered like cracked leather, marked by wind and sun and hard living. His beard, once dark brown, was now streaked with gray. His hands were scarred from knives and traps and the 1,000 small injuries that came with surviving in the wilderness. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his body still strong despite the years, built for endurance rather than speed. He'd been a different man once, a younger man, full of plans and hopes. He'd worked as a courier for the fur companies, then as a scout for wagon trains heading west. He'd had a wife, Sarah, with her gentle laugh and steady hands, a daughter, little Mary, who'd clutched his finger with her tiny fist and looked up at him like he hung the moon. They'd lived in a settlement near Fort Bridger. Nothing fancy, just a wooden house Silas had built himself, with real glass windows Sarah had insisted on. They'd been saving to buy more land, maybe start a proper ranch. Mary was 3 years old, just learning to string words together into sentences. Then came the night their lamp tipped over, while Silas was out checking his trap lines. By the time he saw the flames and ran back, the fire had already consumed everything. He'd tried to go in, but the heat drove him back. He'd screamed their names until his voice gave out, but no one answered. They'd found Sarah's body near the door. She'd been trying to get out, trying to save Mary. But Mary, they never found enough of her to bury. Silas had spent a year drowning in whiskey, working odd jobs just to earn enough for the next bottle. Then one morning he'd woken up in a ditch outside a tavern in Green River, covered in his own vomit, and realized he had 2 choices: put a bullet in his head or disappear into the mountains where nothing and no one could hurt him again. He'd chosen the mountains. That was 10 years ago. In all that time, he'd spoken to another human being maybe a dozen times, trappers passing through, the occasional hunter who'd lost his way. He traded his furs once a year at a remote outpost, taking his payment in supplies and ammunition. He needed nothing else. The wind picked up outside, howling through the pines. The storm was worsening. Silas checked his supplies automatically. Firewood stacked against the wall, dried meat hanging from the rafters, cornmeal and beans in sealed containers, coffee and salt. He had enough to last until spring, maybe longer. He always did. He was settling into his evening routine, checking his rifle, mending a torn coat, when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm. Silas froze, listening. There it was again. A faint thumping, irregular and weak. Someone was at his door. His hand moved to his rifle, years of frontier living making caution automatic. No one came up here by accident, especially not in a storm like this. He moved to the door silently, pressed his ear against the wood. Please. The voice was barely audible over the wind, hoarse and desperate. Please, if anyone's there. A woman's voice. Silas hesitated. Every instinct told him not to open that door, not to let anyone into the sanctuary he'd built. Opening that door meant complications, meant other people's problems becoming his problems, meant... The thump came again, weaker this time, followed by a sound that might have been crying or might have been just the wind. He pulled back the bolt and opened the door. The woman collapsed forward into his arms. She was soaked through, her clothes frozen stiff in places. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as death. She was heavy in his arms, not just the dead weight of unconsciousness, but genuinely heavy. She was a large woman, round-faced and full-figured, her body soft beneath the layers of wet wool. For a moment, Silas stood frozen, this unconscious stranger in his arms, snow blowing in through the open door. Then, training took over. He kicked the door shut, carried her to the fire, and laid her on the bearskin rug. She was alive, but barely. Her breathing was shallow, her skin dangerously cold. Hypothermia. He'd seen men die from it, seen them give up and just lie down in the snow to sleep forever. Moving quickly, Silas stripped off her wet outer layers, a thin coat that was wholly inadequate for this weather, a dress that was equally useless. Underneath, she wore soaked chemise and petticoat. He hesitated, then reminded himself this was life or death, and removed those too, replacing them with one of his own wool shirts and wrapping her in dry blankets and furs. He built up the fire until it roared, then made hot broth from jerky and melted snow. When it was ready, he lifted her head and managed to get some of the liquid past her lips. She coughed, sputtered, but swallowed. Her eyes opened. They were brown, he noticed, dark brown, almost black in the firelight. They focused on him with difficulty, confused and frightened. "Easy," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe, you're inside." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where?" "My cabin. You collapsed at my door." She tried to sit up, but he pressed her back down gently. "Don't move yet. You need to get warm." "I'm sorry," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go. The storm, I got lost, I saw your light. Drink this." He held the cup to her lips again. She drank, her hands shaking too badly to hold it herself. When she'd finished, she lay back exhausted. "I'll leave in the morning, I promise. Just one night, please." Silas looked at her, this stranger who'd stumbled into his refuge, this woman who was crying and apologizing for the crime of not wanting to freeze to death. Something in his chest tightened. "Rest now," he said. "We'll talk in the morning." She closed her eyes, too weak to argue. Within minutes, she was asleep. Silas sat by the fire, watching her. In the firelight, he could see her more clearly. She was young, maybe 25 or 30. Her face was round and soft, with full cheeks and a small nose. Her dark hair, drying now, curled around her face in unruly waves. Her body, wrapped in his shirt and blankets, was undeniably large, not just plump, but genuinely obese in a time when most frontier women were worn thin by hard labor. She didn't belong here. She wasn't dressed for the mountains, wasn't prepared for wilderness travel. Whatever had driven her out into a November storm, it must have been desperate. He added another log to the fire and settled into his chair. Sleep would have to wait. He needed to keep watch, make sure her condition didn't worsen, make sure she kept breathing through the night. As the hours passed and the storm raged outside, Silas found himself studying her sleeping face. There was something peaceful about her, despite everything. She slept like a child, one hand curled under her cheek. When had he last seen another person sleep? When had he last shared this space with another living soul? The memories came unbidden. Sarah sleeping beside him, the soft sound of her breathing in the dark, Mary in her little bed, clutching her rag doll, the simple, ordinary miracle of not being alone. He pushed the memories away. That life was gone. This woman would leave in the morning, and he would be alone again. That was how it should be. But as the night wore on and the fire burned low, Silas found himself hoping, just a little, that morning might take its time coming. She woke near dawn. Silas was still in his chair, rifle across his lap, old habits from years of sleeping light in dangerous country. He saw her eyes open, watched her take in her surroundings with growing awareness. "How are you feeling?" he asked. She sat up slowly, pulling the blankets around herself. "Better. Warmer." She looked down at herself, realizing she wore his shirt. Color flooded her cheeks. "You, Baduri, thank you for saving my life. You want to tell me what you were doing out there?" She was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting in the blanket. When she spoke, her voice was small. running away. From what? From everything, I suppose. She looked up at him, and he saw tears in her eyes again. I'm Ella May Crawford. I came from Red Creek down in the valley. Silas knew Red Creek, a small settlement, maybe 50 people, clustered around a general store and a church. That's a full day's ride in good weather. You walked? I had a mule at first, but he ran off when the storm started. I tried to find shelter, but everything looked the same. I just kept walking, hoping. She shook her head. I don't know what I was hoping for. Then I saw your light. Why'd you leave? Ella May was silent again, her jaw working as if she were trying to decide whether to speak. Finally, she said, My mother died last spring. Fever. After that, my father, he remarried quick. A widow from church, Martha Henley. She paused and Silas waited. Martha has 2 daughters of her own, pretty girls, both of them, slim and fair-haired, the kind of daughters a man can be proud of. Ella May's voice was bitter now. Not like me. Fat Ella, they called me, even when I was little. Fat, useless Ella. Your father let them talk to you that way? My father? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father told me I should be grateful Martha was willing to feed me. Said I ate enough for 2 people anyway. Said no man would ever want to marry me, so the least I could do was earn my keep. Silas felt anger kindle in his chest. So you left. Martha's daughters kept taking my things, my mother's brooch, her shawl, even her Bible. When I complained, Father said I was being selfish, that they deserved nice things more than I did because they might actually catch husbands. Disa, she wiped her eyes with the edge of the blanket. 2 days ago, I heard them talking. Father and Martha. They were planning to send me to work for a family in Cheyenne, as an unpaid servant, basically. A way to be rid of me. So you ran. I took what little money I'd saved from selling eggs. Mother's chickens were mine, and I'd kept the egg money hidden. And I left. I thought I could make it to Laramie, maybe find work there. But I got lost, and the storm came, and she gestured helplessly. Here I am, intruding on your solitude. Silas stood and moved to the stove, where he poured her a cup of coffee. You're not intruding. You live up here alone for a reason. I'm sure you don't want company. He handed her the cup. Drink this. Then we'll see about getting some proper food in you. As he prepared breakfast, salt pork and cornmeal mush, nothing fancy but hot and filling, he felt her watching him. When he set the plate in front of her, she looked at it with something like wonder. It's just mush, he said, embarrassed by her reaction. No one's cooked for me since my mother died, she said quietly. I've been the one doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, while Martha's daughters sat around trying on my mother's dresses. They ate in silence. Silas found himself acutely aware of her presence, the way she held her spoon, the small sound she made when she tasted something good, the way she kept stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. When they'd finished, she helped him clean up, moving around the small cabin with surprising grace despite her size. She washed the dishes in melted snow water while he put things away, and they fell into an easy rhythm that felt disturbingly natural. The storm's not letting up, Silas said, looking out the window. If anything, it had intensified, a proper blizzard now, the kind that could last for days. You can't travel in this. I don't want to impose. You'll stay until it's safe to travel. That's final. She nodded, relief evident on her face. Thank you. I'll try not to be a burden. Over the next few days, as the storm raged outside, they settled into a routine. Silas had expected it to be awkward, having another person in his space after so many years alone. But Ella May seemed to have an instinct for when to speak and when to be quiet. She helped with chores without being asked, grinding corn, mending his clothes, organizing his supplies with an efficiency that spoke of years of household management. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked. Or rather, Ella talked and Silas listened. She told him about growing up in Red Creek, about her mother who'd been kind but worn down by hard work, about the small joys she'd found, a particularly beautiful sunset, a bird's nest she'd watched from egg to fledgling, books she'd borrowed from the circuit preacher. "I love reading," she said one night, her eyes bright in the firelight. "Mother taught me when I was small. We didn't have many books, but I read the ones we had over and over. The Bible, of course, and a volume of poetry someone left at our house once, and a novel about a girl in England. I must have read that one 20 times. "I have some books," Silas said. "Not many, but—" He gestured to a small shelf near his bed. Ella's face lit up like he'd offered her gold. She went to the shelf and examined the books with reverent hands. A Bible, a collection of Hawthorne stories, a guide to trapping and wilderness survival, and a volume of Wordsworth's poetry, its pages worn soft with reading. "May I?" she asked, holding up the Wordsworth. "Go ahead." She settled back by the fire and began to read, her lips moving silently over the words. Silas watched her face change as she read, saw wonder and sadness and joy chase each other across her features. When she looked up, there were tears on her cheeks. "This line," she said. "The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers." That's how I felt back there. Like I was wasting away, becoming nothing, just getting through each day. Silas understood that feeling better than she knew. On the 4th day, Ella asked him about himself. They were working together to shovel snow away from the cabin door. It had piled up nearly 3 feet high overnight. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a world transformed into crystalline white silence. "You never talk about yourself," she said, pausing to catch her breath. "I've told you my whole life story, but I don't even know your full name. Silas Boone. And you live up here all alone. No wife, no family." His hands tightened on the shovel. "Used to have a family." Ella was quiet, sensing dangerous ground, but she didn't back away. "What happened?" He could have refused to answer. Could have shut down the conversation the way he'd shut down every attempt at connection for the past 10 years. But something about her steady brown eyes, her patient silence, made him want to speak. "I had a wife, Sarah, and a daughter, Mary. She was 3 years old." "Was," Ella said softly. "Fire took them. 10 years ago. I was out working, came home to ashes." The words came out flat, mechanical, but underneath was an ocean of pain he'd never fully explored. "After that, I couldn't stay in the settlements anymore. Too many people, too many memories. So I came up here. I'm so sorry." "Don't be. It's done. Pain doesn't get done, Mr. Boone. It just changes shape." He looked at her sharply, but there was no pity in her eyes, only understanding. The understanding of someone who'd also lost people, who'd also learned that grief was a permanent resident in the heart. They finished clearing the snow in silence. That night, as they sat by the fire, Ella said, "Tell me about them. Your wife and daughter." "Why?" "Because they mattered. Because their lives meant something. And maybe talking about them honors that." So Silas talked, haltingly at first, then with increasing ease. He told her about Sarah's laugh, bright as bells, about Mary's habit of collecting pebbles and declaring each one the most beautiful thing in the world, about the little house they had built, the garden Sarah had planted, the future they had planned. And as he talked, he felt something shifting inside him, not healing exactly, but maybe the first tentative movement toward it, like ice beginning to crack after a long winter. Ella listened without interrupting, her hands busy with mending. She'd found his pile of torn shirts and had taken it upon herself to repair them. When he finally fell silent, she said, "They would be glad you're still here, still living." "Am I living, or just existing?" "I think you're figuring that out." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the sun blazing off the snow until it hurt to look at it. The trail down to the valley would be passable in a few days, once some of the snow melted. Ella helped him with his trap lines, trudging through the deep snow with determined cheerfulness. She was strong despite, or perhaps because of, her size, and she didn't complain about the cold or the difficult terrain. When they found a beaver in one of the traps, she watched with interest as he skinned it, asking questions about the process. "Not squeamish?" he asked. "I've butchered my share of chickens and hogs," she said. "Death is part of life out here. No sense being delicate about it." That evening, she made a stew from the beaver meat that was better than anything Silas had eaten in years. She'd found wild onions he'd stored away and used them along with some dried herbs to create something that actually had flavor, not just sustenance. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" he asked. "My mother. She said a woman who could make a good meal from poor ingredients would never starve." Ella smiled sadly. She was a wonderful cook, could make even salt pork taste like something special. "You take after her." She looked at him, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you." As the days passed, Silas found himself dreading her departure. The cabin, which had felt complete in its solitude, now seemed as if it would be empty when she left. He had grown accustomed to her presence, the sound of her humming as she worked, the way she read poetry aloud by the fire, her laughter when he told a dry joke. He had grown accustomed to not being alone. One afternoon, while she was out fetching water from the creek, Silas looked around the cabin and saw it through new eyes. He saw how she had organized his supplies, how she'd hung her mended shirts neatly on pegs, how she'd swept the floor and arranged wildflowers she'd found in a cracked cup on the table. She'd made it a home again. That night, as they sat by the fire, Ella said quietly, "The trail will be clear tomorrow. I should probably start down to the valley." Silas's chest tightened. "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Laramie, maybe. Find work as a cook or laundress. I'll figure something out. It's hard for a woman alone out here." "It's hard for a woman everywhere, Mr. Boone." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "At least on my own, I won't be told daily how worthless I am." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're not worthless. That's kind of you to say. I'm not being kind. I'm stating a fact." He leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped between his knees. "In the week you've been here, you've cooked better meals than I've had in 10 years. You've mended all my clothes, organized my supplies, and kept this place cleaner than it's ever been. You work hard, you don't complain, and you've got more courage than most men I've known." Ella stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" Silas continued, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer contain. "I see a woman who survived being told she was nothing and still managed to be kind, who walked through a blizzard rather than give up, who reads poetry and makes stew and doesn't flinch at hard work. That's not worthless, Ella May. That's strength." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Why are you saying this?" "Because it's true. And because—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Because I don't want you to go." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "You don't mean that," Ella whispered. "I do." "Mr. Boone, Silas. My name is Silas." She stood up, agitated, wrapping her arms around herself. "You don't know what you're saying. You've been alone too long. You're confusing gratitude with what? Say it. With anything else. Once I'm gone, you'll realize you're better off alone." He stood too, moved toward her. "What if I'm not? What if these past few days have been the first time in 10 years I've felt like I'm living instead of just waiting to die? You can't want me." Her voice broke. "Look at me, Silas. I'm fat, I'm plain, I'm nothing special. There are 100 women prettier than me, better than me. I don't want 100 other women. I want you." She shook her head, backing away. "You don't understand. Every man who's ever looked at me has seen someone not worth having. My own father said no man would ever want to marry me. And he was right." Silas caught her hands, holding them gently but firmly. "Listen to me, Ella May. Your father was a fool. Any man who can't see what you're worth is blind." He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I'm not a young man. I'm not romantic. I've got a dark past and more scars than I can count. But I know this. No man will ever love you like I do. She looked up at him, searching his face. How can you possibly know that? Because I know what it's like to lose everything. I know what it's like to live in darkness for so long you forget what light looks like. And then you stumbled through my door and he reached up, gently brushed a tear from her cheek. And I remembered. Silas, she breathed. Stay with me, he said. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through. Stay with me and build something here. Be my wife if you'll have me. Let me spend the rest of my days proving to you what you're worth. For a long moment she just stared at him. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile this time, bright and wondering. You're serious. As the grave. You're asking me to marry you. Me, fat Ella that nobody wanted. I'm asking Ella Mae Crawford, the strongest, kindest, most capable woman I've ever met, to be my wife. She laughed then, a sound of pure joy that filled the cabin like music. Yes, she said. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Silas pulled her into his arms and she came willingly, her head tucking perfectly under his chin. She was soft and warm and alive, and holding her felt like coming home after a long exile. I can't promise it'll be easy, he said into her hair. Winter up here is brutal. The work is hard, and I'm still learning how to be human again. Then we'll learn together, she said, pulling back to look at him. I don't need easy, Silas. I just need real. I need someone who sees me and doesn't look away. I see you, he said, and I'm not looking away. Not ever. And there, in the firelight, with snow falling softly outside and the whole winter ahead of them, Silas Boone kissed Ella Mae Crawford and felt his frozen heart finally, fully thaw. They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who made his rounds through the mountain settlements. Silas borrowed a wagon and took Ella down to Red Creek, where she collected her few belongings, her mother's Bible and brooch, a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, and the precious egg money she'd hidden. Her father and stepmother came out when they heard the wagon. Ella Mae? Her father's voice was sharp with disbelief. What are you doing here? I've come for my things, Father. Her voice was steady, strong. Silas stood beside her, his hand at the small of her back. And to tell you I'm getting married. Martha's laugh was cruel. Married? To who? Who'd be desperate enough? She stopped when she saw Silas, saw the way he was looking at Ella. Not with desperation, but with quiet pride. This is Silas Boone, Ella said. My fiancé. We're to be married next week. Her father sputtered. Now wait just a minute. You can't just run off with some stranger. I can, and I am. Ella met his eyes without flinching. You made it clear I wasn't wanted here, so I found somewhere I am wanted. But who'll do the cooking, the cleaning? That, Ella said with satisfaction, is no longer my concern. Goodbye, Father. They left Red Creek behind without looking back. The wedding was simple. The preacher spoke the words. Silas slipped a ring he'd fashioned from silver onto her finger, and they were husband and wife. The few trappers and hunters who'd gathered at the outpost for winter supplies cheered and wished them well. One old trapper, grizzled and gap-toothed, pulled Silas aside. You're a lucky man, Boone. That's a good woman you got there. I know it. She's a big girl, though. You sure you can feed her through the winter? The man's eyes twinkled with mischief. Silas fixed him with a level stare. She eats no more than any person should, and she works twice as hard as most. Any man who'd judge a woman by her size rather than her character is a fool. The trapper laughed and slapped him on the back. Point taken, friend, point taken. That night, in their cabin, their home now, they lay together in the bed that had been Silas's alone for so long. Ella was nervous, her hands trembling as she undressed. I've never, she stammered. Neither have I, Silas said gently. Not in 10 years. We'll figure it out together. And they did. Slowly, carefully, with tenderness and patience and growing joy. Silas traced the curves of her body with reverent hands, learning every soft line and gentle slope. He kissed away her tears when she tried to apologize for how she looked. "Don't," he said firmly. "Don't you dare apologize for being beautiful. I'm not beautiful. You are to me. Every inch of you." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Do you know what I see? I see strength. I see survival. I see a woman who's lived through hardship and came out still capable of kindness. That's the most beautiful thing in the world." Ella pulled him close, and in the firelight they became husband and wife in truth, their bodies joining with a tenderness that made her weep and made Silas feel, for the first time in a decade, completely whole. Afterward, as she lay in his arms, she whispered, "I never thought anyone would want me like this." "I do," he said simply. "Always will." Winter deepened, and they settled into married life. Ella took to mountain living with surprising ease. She learned to skin game and cure pelts, to read weather signs and predict storms. She kept the cabin warm and organized, cooked meals that made the harsh winter bearable, and sang while she worked, old hymns and folk songs that echoed through the valley. Silas taught her to shoot, patiently correcting her stance until she could hit a target at 30 yards. He showed her how to set snares and check trap lines, how to identify animal tracks in the snow, how to read the forest. "You're a natural," he said one day, watching her field dress a rabbit with quick, efficient movements. "I'm just practical," she replied. "Out here being squeamish gets you nowhere." They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories and dreams. Ella told him about the books she wanted to read, the places she'd imagined visiting but never would. Silas told her about his years as a scout, the wagon trains he'd guided, the people he'd met. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Seeing new places, being around people?" "No," he said honestly. "I've got everything I need right here." She smiled and kissed him. "So do I." As winter wore on, Silas found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. He laughed more. He talked more. The dark silences that had characterized his solitary years gave way to comfortable conversation and shared silence. He found himself making plans, not just for survival, but for the future. Maybe they'd expand the cabin come spring, maybe build a proper barn, maybe even think about— "Silas?" Ella's voice interrupted his thoughts one evening. What if we had children someday?" He looked at her, saw the hope and fear in her eyes. "Would you want that?" "I don't know if I can," she said quietly. I'm already 30 years old, and with my size it might be dangerous." "If it happens, it happens," Silas said. "If it doesn't, that's fine too. You're enough for me, Ella May, more than enough." But secretly he found himself hoping for a chance to be a father again, to do it right this time, to protect and cherish and teach, to build a family with this woman who'd given him back his life. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow melted in fits and starts, revealing brown earth and the first tentative green shoots. The creek swelled with runoff, and the birds returned, filling the air with song. On a warm afternoon in April, Silas and Ella walked down to the meadow below their cabin. Wildflowers were beginning to bloom, lupine and paintbrush and columbine, splashes of purple and red and blue against the green. Ella knelt among the flowers, her face bright with joy. "It's beautiful," she said. "I never imagined anywhere could be this beautiful." Silas knelt beside her. "I'd stopped seeing it," he admitted. "All these years up here, I looked at the mountains and saw nothing but isolation. But now—" He gestured at the wildflowers, the distant peaks still capped with snow, the crystal blue sky. "Now I see what you see." "What do I see?" "Home." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I used to dream about having a home, a real home, where I was wanted and valued, where I could just be myself without apologizing for existing. She looked at him, her eyes shining. You gave me that, Silas. You gave it to me too, he said. I was just existing up here, marking time until I died. You made me want to live again. They sat among the wildflowers until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. As they walked back to the cabin, hand in hand, Silas felt something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace. Not the peace of isolation, but the peace of belonging, of being part of something bigger than himself, of loving and being loved in return. That night, as they lay in bed with the window open to let in the spring air, Ella said sleepily, "Do you ever regret it? Asking me to stay?" "Never," Silas said firmly, "not for a single moment." Good," she murmured, already drifting off, "because I plan on staying for the rest of my life." Silas held her close, this woman who'd stumbled into his life during a snowstorm and changed everything. He thought about the man he'd been, broken, bitter, barely alive. And he thought about the man he was becoming, whole, hopeful, truly living. "No man will ever love you like I do," he whispered into the darkness, repeating the words he'd spoken to her that first night. And he meant them more than ever. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The mountains stood silent and strong. And in a small cabin in a Wyoming valley, two people who'd been broken by the world slept peacefully in each other's arms, healing together, loving together, building a life together. And somewhere in the darkness, the ghost of Silas Boone's past finally, gently let him go.